This is In the Garden with Garrett, and it kind of feels like a fall day. It's getting that time of year where your tomatoes and your produce has to get out of the garden. And one of the really good things you can make is salsa and marinara sauce. And that's one thing we really like to make because we planted so many tomatoes. We've got a lot of tomatoes to use. So we're gonna show you how to make a quick, simple marinara sauce. It's my wife's favorite, and it allows you to just have a really good base that you can add to later in the future. So we're gonna pick tomatoes, sweet basil, fresh onions, and garlic's the only thing that we're gonna add to it. So let's get some tomatoes picked up, and we're gonna get some onions and basil, and then we'll be off to the races making this marinara sauce. So we planted a lot of Roma tomatoes this year, and what's really good about Roma tomatoes is there's not a lot of juice to them. It's a lot more meat. So when you're making marinara sauce and salsa, it's just gonna make a better salsa and a better marinara. You can see these beefsteak tomatoes are so much bigger than Roma. Look at that. These things weigh so much more. I can tell they're juicier. You gotta be careful with these. If you drop them, these tomatoes are toast. So these would be good table slicing tomatoes, salt and pepper on them with a big fat steak, cube steak, something like that. So we planted Walla Walla sweet onions this year, and they're a little bit smaller than I'd like, so we'll have to put a few more onions in the batch of marinara sauce, but these guys are gonna be great. So I'd say we're gonna probably want 4 or 5 of these guys in each batch of marinara sauce and salsa. So still not bad. They're fresh from the garden. We don't have to buy them from the store. We got these starts at Wilco back in early spring. It was like middle of April. So we're gonna pick a few more. We're gonna get that basil picked, and we'll be making marinara sauce before you know it. Pull those out. Okay, shake them off. Okay. So let's cut this off, Viv. Right here, right there, right there. Let's get some more. Like I said, these are small, but they're gonna work perfect for this marinara sauce. You can't get better than fresh. And Vivian's got one too. One thing you can do too, you guys can use these onion greens if you want. You just pick off the ones that aren't so good looking, and you can use the rest of these just like you would chopped up for baked potatoes or things like that.
Onion here.
Good girl. So we've got an amazing herb garden in one of our garden boxes, and our basil has started to go to seed, but that doesn't mean it's gone. You don't cut it back and throw it away. The basil tastes just as good. You're gonna use the leaves, and so we're gonna cut a bunch of this basil off here kind of at the base, and we're gonna end up using the leaves on this for our marinara sauce. I'll squeeze it. Good girl, you got it. Okay, there you go. Give that to mommy. So let's go to the kitchen and see how all this marinara sauce comes together. So we got all of our produce out of the garden. We've got our Roma tomatoes, our onions, our garlic, and our basil. What's really cool about these Roma tomatoes is the stems just pull right off, and so you don't actually have to cut the ends of the tomato off, which actually wastes some of the tomato. So you just pull the stems off. We're gonna cut them up into pieces. We're gonna put them up into the squeezo. And what's really cool about this squeezo, if you guys have never heard of these things, they're really cool. You just you're gonna cut the tomatoes in half. That way they fit through the feeder. And what this does is it actually separates the seeds and the skin off the tomatoes. I learned how to do this when I was a kid because my mom canned all the time, and so did my grandma. And so what you get is a nice, clean, pure tomato sauce that doesn't have any seeds or any skin in it. Now, we have the squeezo, and everybody doesn't have the luxury of having one of these machines. So what you can do is you can cook down your tomatoes and then throw them into a blender, and that'll blend the seeds and that'll blend the skin up a little bit if you don't have a squeezo. So that's one other option that you can do. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut up these onions into little cubes. We're gonna throw them into the pan with a little bit of olive oil. We're gonna chop up this garlic, and we're gonna saute them until they're translucent. Then you're gonna add your basil, and you're gonna add your tomato sauce. Okay, so for this garlic, you can cut it by hand if you want to into a whole bunch of different pieces, But my wife found this really cool little garlic chopper, and you just put them on top. And it cuts them in tiny little cubes. They're not too big and they're not too small. So once you chop all these up with this little chopper, you just dump them in with the onions and keep going. So this is gonna simmer for about 15 or 20 minutes. It's gonna get translucent, and then we'll be ready to add the tomato sauce and the basil. We have the first batch of tomato sauce made through the squeezo, and all we're gonna do, since the garlic and the onions are done, is we're just gonna pour it in. So we just have a little bit of this basil to cut up, to put in the mix, and we're going to simmer the tomato sauce down until it reduces by 50%. When it reduces in half, it's gonna be thick enough for marinara sauce, and then you can can it. So we're just gonna add this basil to the simmering marinara. We've got the last bowl of tomato sauce to add, and we will be ready to can by tonight. Let it simmer away. So we sanitize these jars, and what we're gonna do is put lemon juice in the bottom of each of these jars. And what that's gonna do, it's gonna help the acidity level with the tomatoes. So when they can and they process, it doesn't create botulism. Meanwhile, you need to get your lids heated up. That way they can form to the top of the jar for canning. You're also gonna wanna heat your canning water almost to a boil. So when you put your simmering marinara sauce in there, you don't have hot marinara sauce and cold canning water. You want it to be fairly similar in temperature. That way your jars don't crack and break on you. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna just dab the top of these jars, because when we were pouring, some of that splatter got on the top of them, and if we don't get that splatter off, they won't seal very well or even seal at all. We're gonna take these hot lids that are gonna be super hot to touch, but we'll do it quick. Just set them on there. And then we're going to put the rings on these lids. And you don't want to do them too tight, just tight to the touch. If you do them too tight, what's going to happen is the boiling water, the boiling liquid, and the hot air that's trying to escape won't be able to get out of the jars, and they also won't can either. And once you do all that, I'm just going to take all these, and you want to set them in there gently and make sure they're covered with about 1 inch of water. So we just take them out of the water bath, and we're going to set them down on the towel to cool. And you probably already heard them popping. That's a good sign, because that means they're already sealing up. And once these guys are cooled off by morning, we'll box them up and then we'll store them. We're gonna start eating it. This marinara sauce, like we were saying before, we don't have any salt or any extra seasoning in it, so you can end up seasoning it to your taste, and it's gonna be wonderful for spaghetti and all that kind of stuff. Again, what's really cool about this time of year is we've got tons of vegetables in the garden coming on. We've got tons of tomatoes, peppers, onions. Hey, we hope you guys have been enjoying these In the Garden with Garret series. This is a really cool one because we're doing some canning. If you guys want more information on Grow Outdoor Living, check out our YouTube channel, go to our Facebook page, or check out growoutdoorliving.com.